Greetings comrades, my name is Gigantzels, and today I'm going to be talking about my first Latin Mass. Firstly, don't mind the redecoration behind me. A bunch of posters I ordered finally arrived, and I finally had space to put them up. So, as you can see the big picture of the Blessed Virgin Mary and Jesus there, you can see my destruction of Pompeii over there in the very bottom, and then that one there is the destruction of Sidon. I can do a close-up at some point if you guys want. And then the rest of them are just a bunch of various animes that I like. I'm sure that anyone out there who is a fan of Studio Ghibli or has seen... No, it's not Ghibli, it's Ghibli, something like that. It's pronounced Ghibli. Anyway, I'm not getting into this whole topic. Anyone who's a fan of that studio will probably recognize a few of the titles behind me. Anyway, so about the Latin Mass. I've never been to a Latin Mass before, and finally on Sunday I managed to attend. There's always been a Latin Mass in my cathedral, but the problem is that because of my schedule I was never really able to go until I planned it in advance, and that's because of a number of things. Perhaps one of the biggest problems for me with my Latin Mass was the fact that, well, obviously it's on Sunday, sure. But the problem is that to attend that Latin Mass, I would need to wake up quite early because this Latin Mass is at 8. And some of you may say, that's normal time, why can't you go earlier? Well, I usually spend a lot of time up at night on the weekends, usually a little while after midnight, trying to do whatever project I'm working on, especially with my dissertation and a bunch of work. I'll do it in another video, in next week's video for Life at University. I've got a huge amount of assessments due in mid-January, so I'm probably going to I'm going to have a lot of late nights about that, and so it's no exception, especially over the last few weeks and a couple of months. So I had to organize, I had to try and work as much as I could throughout the week and try and actually make sure that I got up on time for the Latin Mass. That was the first obstacle I had. That was the first obstacle I had to come across. Okay, I had to overcome that, and I did. I woke up on time. I only got 4 hours of sleep though, which was annoying because I usually like to wake up 2 hours before an event to prepare myself properly. So I ended up waking up at 6, and so only 4 hours of sleep that day. And then I slept quite late the following day. The next thing I had to do was basically get my suit and everything prepared. And I wore the same suit that you saw me wear on Halloween, minus the top hat and the cane. The suit was something else entirely because when I went to the cathedral, you see, I thought that everyone that would go there like dressed up in proper suits and everything, because I don't always wear that suit when I go to Mass. I usually just wear a shirt. Okay, obviously I wear just more than a shirt. Okay, I'm not arrested for public indecency or anything, but I usually just go there wearing a shirt, trying to look neat, as well, almost like smart casual. Okay. Hopefully my definition of that is right though. When I went there when I went to the Latin Mass, I was quite hot because not only did I only have long sleeve shirts. I have a long sleeve shirts, and then I had a blazer on that, and then I had my thick Berlin coat. And so I was really hot, so I took off my coat and I was like, okay, I don't need to wear this for the rest of the Mass. I feel like I was the only person there dressed in a suit because everyone else was just wearing their coats perfectly fine. I thought that there would be people who'd be, you know, like braving the cold or something just to all wear suits or something like me. No, I was the only guy there, literally in a white shirt, grey suit, and special grey trousers, and in a striped tie, looking really, really smart. Everyone else was just wearing winter coats. I definitely felt overdressed. There was definitely a different vibe for this Latin Mass than my normal vernacular Mass, which takes place at midday. Though to be fair, that's probably because of how early it was. As I said, the vernacular Mass that I usually attend happens at midday. And so, because of the position of the sun, what usually ends up happening is that as we start approaching the end of the Mass, usually when it's going up to receive communion and the consecration of the bread and wine, the angle that the sun shines into the cathedral makes the cathedral's inside seem to glow and like it looks really appropriate. It looks like this. It looks like there's literally a light shining from heaven, which there literally is, and it's making the whole place glow, and it looks really nice. The problem is that with the Latin Mass, because it was so early, it was really dark, and they had a few lights on, like almost minimal lighting in my cathedral, so it looked really dark, and the main sources of light seemed to be almost the candles around the cathedral. There wasn't anything wrong with the candles, sure, but there was definitely a more somber, in a sense, a more quieter. It felt a lot quieter, not just because there weren't that many people there, but it just felt a lot more quieter and somber than it did the vernacular Mass. Now, when I usually go to the vernacular Mass, even if it's not a day of holy obligation or something, there's usually several dozen people in it, and I was very surprised at how few people were attending the Latin Mass in my cathedral. I was sitting in like the 4th row from the front, okay, and there were only 2 people in front of me, which I was a little bit concerned about because I didn't know how to receive communion. Like, okay, I know how to receive communion, I do, but I wasn't sure if I would have to go up to the altar or not, depending on how many people there were. And so my plan was to sit near the front, but far back enough that I could just follow the cues of the people in front of me. I only saw 2 people there, so I had to literally follow the cues the entire Mass. So every time someone stood up, I was like staring at both of them like a comedian. I was looking at them at the same time. I was like, okay, they're standing up, let's stand up. They're crouching, let's crouch down. And that worked mostly, except for some weird point where they were like doing this weird half kneeling down, and I was going, are we kneeling, are we sitting down, or what? And it's really surprised me how few people who were actually there actually went up to receive communion in this, because actually, I'll go back to that in a minute. I'll try and do this as chronological as I can. One of the biggest differences between the vernacular Mass and the Latin Mass is the fact that the priest doesn't face you, other than the fact he speaks Latin, but he doesn't face you, he faces the altar. And I thought, okay, sure, this is fine, I want to see what this is like. So I was there, and I heard him starting to talk, and I thought, oh, this is going to be Latin. And I barely heard anything he said. Now, my cathedral has many microphones. There's microphones on the altar, microphones on the pulpit, microphones attached to the like with a clip on the attire of the priests. So I thought I would hear him speak. But I really couldn't hear him speak. He was talking like really quietly and in Latin, and I'm not fluent in Latin, and I haven't really heard much Latin other than just a select few prayers, usually said quite loudly. So it was a bit hard for me, admittedly, to follow along with what he was saying. Not to say I didn't try beforehand just to understand the order of Mass. I did. I looked at the prayers we would say, not that I'd ever remember them in the Mass. I looked at the order of Mass, not that I was going to remember it after just one Mass. But I sort of knew what to expect, but it surprised me a little bit just how quiet it was. And because he was facing away from us, the sound in the cathedral didn't quite echo as well. So that meant that I was mostly following the cues of the people in front of me. Then the whole point about communion. As I said, I was in the 4th row from the front. There were only 2 people in front of me. There was one person directly in front of me, a couple of pews away, and then there was someone on the right side of the cathedral. When it came to receiving communion, I thought that there were maybe like a couple dozen of us, and I just followed everyone's cues for this, and I was really surprised at how this would work, because when you look at the traditional Latin Mass, you usually see people with like communion rails, right? But the way they did this was the front pews were completely empty, and not the very front ones so that you kneel on the floor, but I guess the second to the front ones, which meant that it was the last possible pew that you could kneel on with the kneelers, and that acted as our sort of communion rail. And so everyone on the left side of the cathedral, even the ones behind me that I couldn't see, we went up to the front and we all knelt next to each other. So we were scattered over maybe almost 2 dozen pews, there were like 2 dozen pews deep in my church, and we all somehow crowded around a single pew. And then they did the same on the other side of the cathedral. And he went to us one by one, and then there was the altar boy with well, technically altar man with the the silver plate, and they were doing the whole thing with the communion. And I was getting a bit nervous because I'd never received communion on the tongue before either. And fortunately, because there was no one who could actually see me, like they couldn't really see me because they were too far away, and because everyone else is in front of me, and because the priest wasn't even looking at me the whole time. Throughout the mass, I was busy practicing. Okay, how am I going to receive communion? Do I go? Obviously not. Do I go? And I didn't make any other noises. But then when he came to receiving communion, I was maybe the sixth from the end of the pew that he was working down from. So I just looked to my right and I was going, okay, how are they doing this? Okay, he's going, okay, he's going, okay, she's going, minus the noises. I don't know why I keep making the noises. And then when it got to me, I was like, okay, hold my breath, mustn't breathe, must not breathe on him. Because I'm sure the last thing a priest wants, especially when there are people trying to close down the cathedrals and churches again, is for the priest to give someone communion, and then the guy goes on his hand. Obviously, not that loudly, but I really hope I held my breath. I kind of lost track. I was just so frozen, like, do I close my mouth yet? And then he placed it on my tongue and moved on to the next guy, and I thought, okay. I calmed down a little bit. I was definitely okay. Then we went back to our original pews, and when I turned around to walk back, I realized that there were like 24 or 36 people at the very back of the church, like the very back pews. Okay, and they were all sitting there just watching with like little booklets. And I'm going, okay, obviously I didn't do this in public. I didn't say this out loud. I was going, why didn't you come receive communion? Are you just watching this? Or because I was a bit confused. I think they were the choir though, so I'll get to that in a second. One thing I was definitely surprised about was with the Latin Mass was just how little the interaction there was from the laity there. Because with the vernacular Mass, there's the priest says a prayer, we say Amen or something or some other response. We sing the hymns and we say the prayers out loud and everything. But for the Latin Mass, only the priest said it. And to be honest, I'm not sure if this is just common for those who go to the Latin Mass or if this is just a thing that happened in my cathedral. But I was very surprised. A combination of me not really knowing what was going on because of the Latin and quietness, and then not really interacting. It was hard. It was a little bit hard to follow. I feel I have to attend more Latin Masses to understand it. But I was just very quiet. It was very quiet. I only said like a couple of prayers throughout this entire Mass. And it just felt strange to be so quiet compared to them. Because when I used to imagine Latin Mass, I'd almost imagine it as something as you would see in an old movie. So you would have like the large choir and people singing really loud hymns and stuff, like almost like a Gregorian chant. So I thought the cathedral would be louder in a sense, but it was very quiet, and that was a bit strange for me. The only time there was actually singing was at the end of the Mass, and as the priest and the altar man were going away, that's when the choir behind us started singing. And then I didn't understand a single word they were saying because I didn't understand Latin. And I think one of the problems in general when it comes to singing in a church is that if you're not really familiar with what singing in a church sounds like, especially if it's like in like Old English or in Latin, it's almost like a constant hum with highs and lows, and you can't really distinguish what's being said. And so I was just hearing them singing behind me, and I was going, okay, I can't join in. I'm going to look like an idiot for not saying anything this entire Mass. Like even if we were praying, some of the prayers I didn't understand too well, but I felt strange to just basically be going, following the priest. So that lack of participation was definitely a strange experience for me. And then it was actually a good thing I did go to Latin Mass, I found, because it gave me an excuse to get out of bed that day. And so then after that, I went and ended up having an early lunch, and I managed to get extra work done that day because I'd woken up early and I slept for a while the following day. But I'm not saying I didn't like the Latin Mass. I did. It was interesting. It was very interesting to follow. And like I said, I feel I need to attend more Latin Masses so that I'm actually able to understand what's going on and to get the general idea of it, to understand the prayers being said. I need to familiarize myself more with the Latin being said. it was actually quite nice to hear them say Latin, because the few things I did hear them say, I try and pray in Latin sometimes. However, the problem is I don't really hear Latin much, so the closest thing I have to hearing Latin is if I go onto Wikipedia for like hearing the Our Father pray in Latin, and I just hear the Gregorian monks singing the Our Father in Latin, and I sort of base every single time I've said every time I said the Our Father prayer in Latin, I base it on that recording, and so to hear them, to hear the priest say that prayer in Latin and then a bunch of other prayers in Latin I said, I thought, okay, I'm pronouncing those words correctly. Now I just need to hear prayer in Aramaic, and Greek too, but that can wait for another day. So it was interesting. It was an interesting experience, and I feel like I do need to go to more Latin masses to truly understand them. It was definitely a surprise compared to the later midday vernacular mass. With the it was darker, it was quieter, there was less interaction between the laity and the priest. So yeah, it was confusing. I'm sure that a lot of people who go to the Latin mass for the first time may be quite confused, like I definitely was. And also my parish is a bit small, so maybe that's why there wasn't as many people in it. That's why it felt a bit empty. But I will try and go to more Latin masses again in future. That is my goal. Yeah. Although my church does do live streams when it comes to the mass and the Latin mass, the problem I find with that is it's very quiet. Like I said, it's quite hard to hear, even with the microphones. When they speak Latin, they talk very quietly. So I'm gonna have to spend some time trying to follow along, maybe watch Latin masses on YouTube, actually understand what the prayers are being said, how to respond when needed, or maybe if I need to say silent prayers, because I think there are a couple of silent prayers that you can say in the Latin mass, but I don't know them, let alone in Latin. So I'm gonna have to do more research on this. I need more Latin masses to experience it, but otherwise I definitely found the Latin mass interesting, and I do plan on going back there again. I just need to try and find a suitable time for that, and actually try and arrange my schedule so that I don't end up sleeping for 10 hours the following day. Yeah, I have a lot of work to do for university, so if I do take breaks, especially next year, just bear with me, okay? I've got a lot of work to do. But otherwise, like I said, the Latin Mass, my first Latin Mass, it was interesting. It was new. It definitely had a different feeling to it. It was definitely comforting to hear Latin, to hear the prayers I say in Latin said almost identical to the way I say them. So I was going, okay, I'm saying these prayers correctly. And it was also interesting to hear how, because obviously the Latin Mass is a lot older than the vernacular Mass. So yeah, I quite like the Latin Mass, and hopefully I can go and attend more in future. If any of you out there have maybe articles or links to help me understand the Latin Mass or the prayers being said, please give them to me, because I know there's quite a few all over the place, and I'm not sure if maybe my Latin Mass is slightly different for all of you guys out there. Maybe your guys, you participate slightly more, or maybe you can, maybe it's just my priest in general being quiet like I am when I talk normally. So any help, if you guys can give me any help for understanding the Latin Mass, please help me. Yeah, so that's it effectively for this video. So if you like this video, please do give it a like, please do share my videos, and please do comment what you think of them, and any other videos you want me to do. Please do subscribe to my channel so you can see more content, and please do ring the bell so you can keep up to date with my video releases. I was so close to finishing my outro without stuttering once. Anyway, so hopefully I can attend more Latin Masses again in future, and if you have any ways of helping me understand the Latin Mass, please leave it in the comments below. So anyway, God bless you all, see you next video, comrades, until then.